We are here. You on? Say something. Yeah.
Yes, I'm on.
Awesome.
I'm on.
We're going to finish Joseph today.
We hope.
Well, I've already told Bill Shannon we were finishing, so we will definitely try.
Yeah, I didn't realize last week, Stan said something to me and near the end, and I said, I was just thinking we had 6 or 7 slides left. Ooh, wrong. So
we had 50. So.
But it's a great story. There's no doubt about it, the Joseph story. So we'll finish it up today. Juanita just finished reading a book that we want to recommend to all of you. If I get the name of the Fleecy Clouds, is that the Fleecy Clouds? I guess that's a fleeting cloud. I don't know. The book's not about us, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Fleecy Clouds. Gail Barber wrote this book. It is a phenomenal book about her life, and Juanita kept finding parallels with the Joseph story. But it's a very moving. You know Jerry Barber. Les mentioned him in the sermon today. Gail and Jerry was on the last Israel trip, and anyways, just of course you know Jerry from doing some interim preaching here a few years ago. But let me recommend the book really highly to you. And again, thanks for all the people who are working. We had a person drop out this morning because of COVID, believe it or not. Michael Jordan has COVID, and we just try to remember him in our prayers. So naturally, his wife had to drop out with him, and we had a person step up immediately into the medical table. And so this congregation has been absolutely fantastic along those lines. We want to thank you very much. So, Stan?
Let's resume. I put the remaining rest of the story.
Yeah, last week we had the rest of the story, and we didn't finish.
I'm glad somebody thought that was funny, besides me. So what we'd worked up to last week was we had gotten through the rise of Joseph and his power, his 2 sons. We went through their names. And then we're here for where actually the brothers have come down. We went through that. We went through the silver cup that had been put in the pack animal, I guess, going back. Joseph had sent men to chase after them, had found that. They didn't know how it got there. They're in a real jam. And so then he ends up telling them who he is, and now they're sending for Jacob to come down. And we stop there because there's a lot going on here with the invitation of Jacob to come down to Egypt.
Yeah, Jacob's mental state, he's been through now, we're about 21 and a half years since Joseph was sold into slavery. By the end of, when they come down, Joseph tells them after they get all settled, he tells them there are 5 years left of the famine. So a full 22 years there, but it's about 21 years or so, 21 and a half years. And so you've gone through that period of time and you've lost a child. And frankly, he was probably, according to the text, he was the favorite child of theirs. And now he's got to go through this emotion of having found the child. I've seen several, programs and on the internet you can see some where people get together who haven't seen each other since they were babies or whatever. There was 2 couples, 2 different children were adopted by 2 different families when they were babies, and they got to meet each other when they became adults, and that was emotional. So Jacob's going to go through some real emotional periods here.
Yeah, and the emotions show up right here. If you notice that second paragraph, Joseph throws his arms around Benjamin, and they both begin to cry. And then Joseph kissed each of his brothers. And there's already, we set this up a little bit last week, but there's already this anticipation that thank goodness their dad's still alive, because Joseph probably is holding a grudge, is what his brothers are most likely thinking. And the minute he gets to exercise revenge. They're afraid that he might. But that's right off the bat not being shown. I mean, he's genuinely just super excited that they're reunited, and he's lavishing them with love and with gifts and saying, "Go get Dad, bring him down, because if you'll bring him down, I'll provide everything you guys need."
And I've got to be honest with you, I'd have a grudge. So it really shows something about Joseph's character. When you look at the different people in the Bible, and you may think he was a little cruel the way he handled this, and we can't read his mind, and I don't think it was revenge. I think he was just in shock himself. And but anyway,
I agree, and I also wonder if it wasn't a little spot character assessment. You know, the way Reuben responded, the way Judah responded, the way Benjamin responded, he's kind of seeing if they are like they used to be because he's changed a lot, or have they changed too? And they've changed too.
Right, that's correct.
So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, do as follows. Load your animals and return to the land of Canaan. Then bring your father and your families and return to me." And we talked about this last week. That some of that has a lot of interesting imaging of everything's going to be provided. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt. Well, Jesus gives us the best of all of creation, the best of the land, period, all of it, and returns us to the Father's communion with us. And so we said last week, is there a connection here? I think there is, but there doesn't have to be, one that's forced, because after that, the connections kind of separate. So the brothers went up to Egypt and came to their father in the land of Canaan and told him what had happened. Jacob was stunned. I think that's probably an understatement. He had the coat of many colors that was in the blood that he thought Joseph has been dead for all this time, and all of a sudden they're saying, no, he's alive, and he wants you to come see him. And he didn't believe them. But when he saw the wagons,
he changed his mind. Saw all those wagons that Pharaoh wanted to bring all that stuff, get them, take them back home, and I just love that expression. When he saw the wagons, he believed this.
Yeah, you told us last week there's a sermon in your head
entitled
that.
I put a whole sermon together one time, and I called it "When He Saw the Wagons," was the name of the sermon.
And that would have been quite a sight. I mean, this would be, I don't even know how to do this in our time. I mean, it would be over the top entry to your driveway, your house, or whatever, with just an entourage of stuff. The provisions, probably luxurious things, animals that are available, food, just all kinds of stuff. So this isn't just a proof that if you come down to Egypt, you'll have something to eat. I'll buy you dinner tonight. Here's basically a whole new reboot of a life, and here's all of the necessities that make that up.
Right.
So it was a wagon train just full of stuff, full of supplies, full of abundance, basically, which is, again, an interesting reference to what Jesus does for us with our Father. And Jacob cried out for joy, "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go to see him before I die." So he realizes his time is short, but he's excited to make a trip. Now, how far a trip is this? How long is it going to take him to get there?
Horse and wagon. It takes us about 4 or 5 hours to drive there from Israel through the Sinai if you go straight there. Yeah. And so it's quite a trip. I'll never forget Sharon Cummings, a real estate lady, was with us, and we got. They had sent a bus to pick us up at the Red Sea. And this bus was on its last legs. We thought we were going to have to get out and push. And Sharon looked at me and she said, "Now I know how the Israelites felt when they came." Of course, they were walking and riding donkeys and things, but it was quite a trip. And so it is a tough trip. Yeah, the children. I thought, as I told you last week, there's so much in these 13 chapters, chapters 13 to 15. You say, well, isn't that 14 chapters? Well, yes, if you count both ends, but chapter 38 is devoted to Judah. You break away from the story just for a few minutes. And when you get to this chapter, 46, it lists all these children, but the reason that we listed Rachel's children, especially the sons of Benjamin, because remember, people usually translate this the 6 or 7 times that Benjamin's called a Nahar when they're talking about him and they still don't know it's Joseph. They say, we can't bring the Nahar with us. And it's usually translated, can't bring the boy with us. Can't be a boy. It's almost 22 years now. And he was already alive and his mother had already died. And so he is probably, the word is probably used there because Jacob probably had made him the crown cheek. Joseph had been the crown cheek. Now he made him. So 10 sons tells you that he's not 12 years old, besides his daughters.
Well, and you pointed out for us last week, not only 10 sons that would just have been a number, but they're named. And there's all 10 names and why you put them in there.
Right.
Because if they're named, it's significant.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It could be that the number in the copying, a number might get knocked out or something like that, and in the manuscripts. But, he was probably 25, 6, 7 years old.
So now Jacob had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to get directions to Goshen. And when Jacob's family arrived in the land of Goshen, Joseph prepared his chariot and went there to meet his father, Israel. Joseph presented himself to him, embraced him, and wept profusely. So he's given them their own territory, which Goshen was a very lush part of the area that Joseph was over, right? Very fertile.
Yeah.
Great place for Dad and all the families to live and to farm and to raise crops.
Yeah, the Delta area is very, very, even when you go down to Egypt today, I've been to Alexandria and Cairo and Giza. Never have been to the port on one side, but the Nile River breaks into many branches right there and forms a very, very productive delta.
And after 22 years, that might be what one artist thinks the greeting might have looked like. There's Jacob being embraced by Joseph.
Yeah. It's really a touching scene.
Very much so.
I remember, I think I may have mentioned this, I was studying one night late. For some reason, I don't remember why I was studying so late. But it was like 2 in the morning, and one had gone to bed, and I think we were getting ready to read this in Hebrew. I think that's what was going to happen the next day in class. I had a class where we were going to read the Joseph story, and in a few meetings. And I remember reading the story, and it just hit me when Joseph broke into tears. I found tears were rolling down my cheeks in several places in the story. It's really a touching story.
And Israel said to Joseph, "Finally I can die, now that I've seen your face and know that you're still alive." Which is also interesting because Simeon says that about baby Jesus when he gets to see the Lord. So there's just so many parallels here in this story, I think. But for Jacob, it was a relief. And I guess, I don't know that I can really put that into logic, because if he really thought he was dead, how does he say, "I can now die now that I've seen you alive"? But he never would have had an inkling of an idea that would have ever happened. So maybe he's saying, "I wish I had been dead before, but now I know why I have survived, is because it's the only way I can turn it around and make it make sense."
Yeah, an interesting parallel here it's just probably an accident, but Jacob spends 34 years with Joseph. The first 17 and the last 17. After he gets down to Egypt, he lives 17 more years and dies. So he was with him this first 17 years when he was taken into captivity, and he was with him the last 17 years. It's probably means nothing, but I just thought it was interesting.
No, I think it does mean something. That kind of confirms what I'm saying. He kind of got reinvigorated to not just want to die. Right. Anything from here on will make life worth living, basically, is the way you might be able to translate or think through what he's suggesting. So then Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. So Joseph settled his father and brothers in the land of Egypt and gave them the property, the best part of the land that we talked about in Goshen, the district of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph also provided his father and brothers, all of his father's household, with food for their families. Yeah. So you still have famine going on. You got 5 more years, maybe now a little less than 5, right?
Right.
And they're provided for better than they've probably ever been provided for in the middle of when the rest of the world is in a time of need.
Yeah. It's just, again, there's just so many aspects of the story that's incredible. All right?
So the Israelites prosper in Goshen because Israel's there now. Jacob had his name changed to Israel. That was on one of the previous slides. So this is the Israelites' area. And now the Israelites settled in the land of Egypt and in the region of Goshen, and they acquired property there and became fruitful and increased greatly in number, as was predicted they would. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, as Dr. Cloud just said, and the length of his life was 147 years.
Yeah. So you have to look at it another way, too. You take those 34 years away, but Joseph, a lot of times didn't have Joseph with him. That's so sad. Anyway.
So now the time comes that Jacob is at the end.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's he wants to be buried in that same in the same area where Abraham and Isaac were buried, the same tomb, and at a place called Machpelah in Hebron. And when Herod the Great was alive, he built a kind of a mausoleum, a memorial over that. And in archaeology, when you're studying, usually you don't get to see something totally there. But in Hebron, a few miles, about 17, 18 miles, a little further south of Jerusalem, 23, I think, you have this memorial that is still totally intact. It's just completely still there. And you have an entrance for the Muslims. On one side, you have an entrance for the Jews and Christians. They have the same entrance, but usually they go in at different times. But inside, supposedly, and there's no reason to doubt it, they're buried. And years ago, one of the Israeli generals decided to. They put a young man, a fairly small person. They lowered him down and let him go into the cave. So I don't know much about that, but anyway, they kind of keep it sealed up. So we just assume the bones of those three there. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their wives, their first wives, Rebecca, and Rachel, not Rachel, but Leah is Jacob's partner, but Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah are buried there.
We have a picture of that later before we finish this morning of that structure, which will be neat. But tell us about this, put your hand under my thigh and promise to show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt.
Yeah, it was, many scholars have come up with different views and all, but the idea was, for whatever reason, it was a sacred way of doing things, and putting your hand on the upper thigh and doing that. Again, we don't know all the significance, but one day we may find some archaeological discovery that tells us. That happens all the time. We'll find something that will explain an idiom in the Bible or a practice in the Bible we didn't know about. I know we were. They dug up a city in Mesopotamia called Nuzi, and people kind of wondered about Abraham marrying his sister. You know, they had the same father but different mothers. And lo and behold, we found a tablet that talked about in Nuzi, that was, you married your half-sister. That was the top marriage, the best marriage. It was a special relationship. So we don't always know, you know, why an idiom is there, but again, there's just lots of theories there, but it was a sacred oath. Maybe, you know, somebody didn't put their hand there unless you're very familiar with it. You might get your face slapped or something. But anyway, this was the way they did it. It showed this was really a very, very sacred oath.
Yeah, so for this area of the text, what we're saying is it's so important that he not be buried in Egypt.
Right.
That they went to that length to make that agreement. He wants to be buried with his fathers, or lie down with his fathers, as they call it. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me with them. And that's exactly what Joseph does. So Jacob prepares to die, and here's some artistic renderings of that. I guess the text doesn't really necessarily tell us, but I guess it was somewhat of a known event, and it took a little while. It wasn't just like he was here today and gone tomorrow. It was more of a exiting.
Right.
Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, which is part of his preparing to die, is transferring the blessings and doing all of this end of life. I don't want to call it paperwork, but end of life duties that the father does, passing down. Right. So sometime later, Joseph was told, "Your father's ill," and so he set out with his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And when Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel rallied his strength and sat up in bed in order to provide the blessings onto Manasseh and Ephraim.
Right. It's an interesting deathbed scene. In the history of the Bible, the Venerable Bede was one of the, lived in the Old English period. He was, the story goes, he was dictating the Gospel of John to a scribe. He was translating the Gospel of John into English. And anyway, he was working every day trying to get it finished before he died. He finished it, and a few hours later he died, according to the story. You know, it's interesting scene there. He was trying to provide the Gospel of John into English for the Anglo-Saxon people. Well, here we have these two boys are going to father, of course, two of the tribes. And as I said last week, that makes 13 tribes. So what happens is the tribe of Levi, though, is scattered among all of the tribes. So Levi doesn't have a special area. Oh, this is where the tribe of Levi lived. But this actually turns out to be almost 3 tribes, because there's a tribe east of the Jordan, half tribe of Manasseh, half tribe west of the Jordan.
Because the priests were scattered through all the tribes.
Right.
Interesting here that it says Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine.
Right.
These are his grandsons.
Right. He's going to treat them as if they're
their full sons.
And so there is no tribe of Joseph. Sometimes the whole north is called Joseph in Scripture. The north is called Israel. It's called Joseph, just every once in a while. And so that's interesting. But when he was the father of the northern tribes, and 2 of the main northern tribes. And they're very, very important tribes. They really are.
So, go ahead.
That's right.
Now, as for me, when I was returning from Haran, to my sorrow, Rachel died along the way in the land of Canaan, some distance from Bethlehem. So I buried her there beside the road to Bethlehem. And we had a great discussion when we were putting this together, that so many people think they know exactly where she's buried, but they misinterpret what he said. She died on the way to Bethlehem,
right,
not after they got there.
Right. Yeah, the tomb of Rachel is first mentioned, kind of where it is, when in the book of Jeremiah, they're using Rachel as the mother of Israel. Of course, Rachel was just the mother of Benjamin and Joseph. But they're using Rachel as the mother of all, and the Babylonians are killing children. So Rachel weeping for her children. And so, and Jeremiah is in Jerusalem. And so anyway, people have that feeling. Well, go back and look later in Samuel, and it doesn't say that Rachel, she was buried in Bethlehem, and that's where the tomb is today. They got a tomb in Bethlehem, but just as you come into Bethlehem, there's a tomb. It says she was buried on the way, the road. There was a road that went to Jerusalem. There's a road that went by it from the north all the way to Bethlehem. And you didn't always get to go through Jerusalem. You weren't always allowed to go through. It was not an Israeli city. But anyway, in the story of Samuel, he says to Saul, this is going to happen to you, this is going to happen to you when you go on your way. He told him, he'd anointed him as king already, and so he said, this will happen, and that'll happen, and when these things happen, you'll know that I'm telling you the truth. And he says, you will come to the tomb of Rachel. It says it right there. And where he went was on the border between Benjamin and Judah. And so it's west of Jerusalem, somewhere west. It's a little bit northwest. And what happened was that has always been recognized over the years as the place where the tomb of Rachel was. When King Hussein of Jordan decided, back when they ruled the West Bank, decided he would build himself a palace, and he actually built a palace where he thought it started a palace. The war interrupted. It started a palace, and in the process of building all these roads and everything, the bulldozers destroyed the tomb of Rachel. Actually, the bulldozers just plowed it under the ground. And so we know roughly where it was, but not exactly. But that's where the traditional site of Rachel was, Rachel's tomb. In the book of Jeremiah, he is using general terms. He's using Rachel as the mother of all of the area right there. It said Rachel weeping for her children. And so because of that, along came somebody and built a tomb in Bethlehem. So that's it right there.
Yeah, and in Hebrew there it says tomb of Rachel. And that's the outside of it, which there's a menorah up there at the top, and that's the gate to get in, and you have the dome there. But inside it looks a little bit more elaborate. This is actually after you've come down off the street level, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Kever Rachel. Yeah, the Hebrew word for Rachel is Rachel. That's the way Rachel is pronounced in Europe, Rachel. We're the ones that pronounce it Rachel. But anyway, it means little ewe lamb. And so that's the grave or the tomb. Kever is the same word for tomb and grave.
I can't remember. Do we have 3 pictures? No, just 2. So that is the real entrance, and where after you've come down from what's built all around the outside of it, what they have as the presentation. But you're saying this is not really it.
No, it's just not really the right place, but it became a traditional place. And that happened a lot in places because when Helena, the mother of Constantine, after her son was converted to Christianity, she went to Israel, and he gave her a blank MasterCard, Visa card, said, buy whatever you want to do, spend all this money. Anyway, she went and spent a lot of money. And what she did was she asked the natives, where did Jesus preach the Sermon on the Mount? And they said, this place right here. So a church was built eventually. Where's Rachel buried? It was right here. And so a lot of things happened because of that. Where's Jesus crucified? And so, they actually put money into doing that kind of thing. So a lot of the sites we know exactly where they were, but we don't always know exactly where. And this we know from Samuel tied together with Jeremiah that it was northwest of Jerusalem.
So when Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked, who are these? Joseph said to his father, "They are the sons God has given me in this place." So he didn't know he had 10 grandsons, apparently. Now Israel's eyesight was poor because of old age, and he could hardly see. Joseph brought his sons to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them. And again, this is just Ephraim and Manasseh. And so Joseph took both of them, with Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and put it on the head of Ephraim the younger, and crossing his hands, he put his left on Manasseh's head, although Manasseh was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph.
This is what Joseph wanted him to do. He placed the older son to the side and the younger one, and then this is what he did. He reached across and blessed the one of Ephraim over that, and Joseph protested.
And very similar to Jacob and Esau, once the blessing has been given, the blessing has been given.
Right.
You can't change it.
Right.
So Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, Genesis chapter 48. And you liked this picture because of what
you can really see the hands.
Yeah, you can really see the hands, not the ages of the individuals, but
right.
but
right.
the hands.
Yeah, we had no idea.
Yeah.
But we know the boys couldn't be very old because remember,
Right.
he's just been governor 9 years now.
Right.
And therefore, they did a pretty good job with that. I think I've got one picture where the boys look like they're about 18 or 20, and that's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. When Joseph saw that his father had placed his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased and took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head. So you've got this, and you've got some helping trying to pull it back apart. We all know those situations probably, and some things that have happened in our lives where we're trying to nudge somebody to do something they don't realize that they're doing. Not so, my father, Joseph said. This one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. So he tried to get it changed.
Right.
But his father refused. I know, my son, I know, he said. He too shall become a people, and he too shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brothers shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. So he put Ephraim before Manasseh.
So Ephraim becomes actually the heart of northern Israel when the kingdom divides. Ephraim is just a very, very powerful tribe right in the middle. And even Samuel lived there. Samuel was a Levite living in the church. And the text calls them Ephraimites because that's where they live. Like if you live in Cincinnati, you call it Cincinnati, and or Nashville, you may not be from there. I don't think Les saw my hand today. It was Blake and I were from Alabama, and somebody said over there from Alabama, I don't know who it was. But anyway.
One of the elders, because he said the worship leader and an elder.
Right.
Yeah, and I saw you kind of,
Yeah. So anyway.
So here's your map. I knew we were going to get to this so that you can explain that you've got Manasseh in green on the left and you got Manasseh in green upwards and to the right up by the Sea of Galilee. But that's because of the division there.
Right. That's because a lot of the people of Manasseh wanted to settle on the right-hand side, and so Joshua said, okay, you can settle over here, but you need to send your soldiers on the west side so when we conquer the land, you don't need to get out of that fighting. There's going to be a lot of fighting there, and we need you over there. And you can see the two areas together are larger than any other areas at all. It's a very, very large area. When I dug on my first dig, we dug 10 miles south of Megiddo and 9 miles east of Caesarea in the upper part of Manasseh there. And the man in charge of the dig, Dr. Adam Zertal, who died just a few years ago, Dr. Zertal was reared in a kibbutz there at Bar Kai, and that's where we stayed. For those, we had several people from Hendersonville on that dig with us, and so that's where we stayed. And so you do a lot of running around Manasseh, but of course on the left-hand side, the eastern part of the left-hand side is where the West Bank is today. Gives you at least an idea, and back to the story of the burial, you can see where Benjamin where it ends down there, and if you were to the left of Jerusalem there and going down, there was a road that led to Bethlehem, and somewhere around that area is where the actual original tomb was.
And also, just you've said it, but the green area is so much more massive than the Ephraim area.
Yeah, just
teal.
But the Ephraim area had very important places like Shiloh is where Samuel grew up, and a very, very important city where some of our students have dug there. Dr. Jonathan Moore, who owns many foot and ankle clinics in Kentucky, just got his doctorate a month ago, and he dug at Shiloh, and his dissertation deals with Shiloh.
Yeah, we had some friends from Maple Hill Church of Christ that just dug at Shiloh about 4 weeks ago.
Right. And
so Jacob blesses his sons. Judah is a young lion, returning from the prey. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and the allegiance of the nations is his.
yeah, we couldn't put all the blessings. There were so many long blessings there, but I thought, well, this dealt with, this is one of the predictions of Christ and David becoming king and then Christ becoming king. It's taken that way, so I thought I'd put that one in there.
Yeah, the language there of the Lion of Judah comes from right there.
Right.
Joseph is a fruitful vine by a spring whose branches scale the wall. The archers attacked him with bitterness. They aimed at him in hostility, yet he steadied his bow, and his strong arms were tempered.
And that's what I chose Joseph, because we're doing the Joseph story. That's why I picked out that. So that's the reason for those two.
And so the death of Jacob comes. Then Jacob instructed them, I'm about to be gathered to my people and buried with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephraim the Hittite. The cave is in the field of Machpelah, near the land of Canaan. This is the field Abraham purchased from Ephraim the Hittite as a burial site. There Abraham and his wife Sarah are buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah are buried, and there I buried Leah. So there's your extraction of what you listed for us earlier.
Right. Now the Hebrew word probably means the double bit cave. We can't be positive about that, but anyway, that's probably where it was. And so it's still there, as I said.
And so everybody gathers around Jacob to say their temporary goodbyes. And then there's your structure you were telling us about earlier this morning.
Yeah. Herod the Great built this. Herod the Great did an incredible amount of building. He built Herodian just east of Bethlehem, about 1.5 miles or 2 miles, where we think we found his casket now. He built the temple. He just built all over, plus he built outside the land. He built in
the palace at Caesarea Philippi.
Yeah, he's built so many things, and even built some things in Greece and Asia Minor just to make people happy. But he was just a tremendous builder. This is the only thing he built that's still fully intact.
Which that's amazing.
It is amazing. So we're talking about over 2,000 years.
Here's the inside of it, where supposedly each little block is one of the crypts for each person, right?
That's my understanding.
And so the death of Jacob happens, mourning and burial. Then Joseph fell upon his father's face, wept over him, and kissed him. And Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father, Israel. And this is something that a lot of times I think we read over pretty quickly. The reason for that is he's been in Egypt for all these decades, and he's adopted a lot of the Egyptian practices. And so the embalming would be something that the Egyptians would know how to do. Right. And he does that for his father, which normally would not have taken place.
Yeah, people don't realize how complicated archaeology is in the actual dig, but you need all kinds of technicians. You need computer experts. You need X-rays. They X-ray the mummies and other things, X-ray the mummies. And so that's just one of the many different expertises that you need people having when you go on a dig.
And then Joseph pleads with Pharaoh based on the oath to his father, Jacob, that he would not bury him in Egypt. And he says, let me go and bury my father, and then he'll return. And Pharaoh lets him go.
Right.
Then Joseph went to bury his father, and all the servants of Pharaoh accompanied him, the elders of Pharaoh's household and all the elders of the land of Egypt, along with all of Joseph's household and his brothers and his father's household. Only their children and flocks and herds were left in Goshen. So basically the whole adult family goes to bury Jacob.
Yeah.
Chariots and horsemen alike went up with him, and it was an exceedingly large procession. So Jacob's sons did as he had charged them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in a cave with Abraham and with Sarah and with Rebekah and Leah. After Joseph had buried his father, he returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone with him to bury his father. And when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, now they're really getting worried. Now they're concerned that what if Joseph bears a grudge? Then he will surely repay us the evil that we did to him. So they sent a request to Joseph asking in Jacob's name for forgiveness. That's interesting.
Yeah.
In the name of our dad, don't revenge what we did to you when you were 17.
Right.
And when their message came to Joseph, he cried again. His brothers also came to him, bowed down before him, and said, we are your slaves. So they offered themselves to him. But Joseph replied, do not be afraid. I am in the place of God. Am I in the place of God? As for you, what you intended against me for evil, God intended for good. That's the famous line that we use oftentimes for many different situations in people's lives. In order to accomplish a day like this, to preserve the lives of many people, because remember, he's feeding through the storehouses all these people during the famine. Therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. So Joseph reassured his brothers and spoke kindly to them.
That statement, that's all through this book that Juanita has been reading this week by Gail Barber. All the terrible things that happened, bad things that happened to her, she looks back with the same attitude.
And then it's very close in proximity in the text. Now we get to the death of Joseph, which we talked about this at great length when we were putting this together too. It's rather strange, but it is what it says. It says that all of Joseph's brothers gathered around him when he died, but he's not the oldest. So it's strange that something, maybe we'll find out one day why Joseph, even though 110 is a long time to live, it's still strange that he was the first to die of the 12,
first mentioned anyway.
Yeah, first mentioned. So he says to them, I'm about to die, but God will surely visit you and bring you up from this land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel take an oath, just like he did with Jacob, that his bones must be carried out from this place. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and they embalmed his body and placed it in a coffin, and there's where I got derailed a little bit, in Egypt. And you liked this. You had me add, and Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you and carry my bones from here with you. So the bones of Joseph go out of Egypt with Moses when all of the Hebrews go out of Egypt as well.
Right.
And Joseph's bones with the Israelites had brought up from Egypt were buried at Shechem in the tract of land that Jacob bought for 100 pieces of silver from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. This became the inheritance of Joseph's descendants. So Joseph's bones go out of Egypt in the ark of Joseph, basically.
Yeah, along with it, yeah. And this is, Shechem is right between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And that's where a discovery has just been made at Mount Ebal recently by Adam Zertal that I dug with, started that. And now they found some other things. And here is the tomb, picture of the tomb a few years ago. And somebody's always been trying to destroy it. The anti-Jewish people have tried to destroy it on several occasions.
And believe it or not, that was the last lot. So we have finished Joseph very similarly to the way it finishes in the Hebrew Bible. It goes through his story, the death of Jacob, and then immediately after that, his death, and then it's over, because Exodus starts with a Pharaoh came to power that did not know Joseph.
Yeah. And so that did not know, that word either means he never heard of him, or and then tried to erase the records, which that happened with some people. They just actually erased the records of a lady named Hatshepsut, whom I think is the one that pulled Moses out. And so or it could mean that he didn't recognize him. He knew him, but he was a Semite, and now the Israelites are slaves, and so Joseph, what he did in the past, didn't make any difference to these pharaohs.
So we will start next week, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus.
Right. And anyway, is it my turn?
It can be your turn.
Okay, all right.
All right.
You'll bow your head. Gracious, very, very kind, loving Heavenly Father, we just never tire of giving you thanks and praise for who you are, and for sending, who loved us so much to send your special Son to die in our place. Again, we thank you for these stories, and as we read through them and see how you dealt with these people, we learn a lot about your nature, and again, about especially your love and forgiveness and kindness. And we thank you so much for the story of Joseph and all the stories